Make it a great. Hi, I'm John Mayfield, the real estate tech guy for Global Real Estate School, and thank you for joining us for another Key Terms webinar where we are going to talk about encumbrances today. Hey, I just finished one of my 5-minute tips. I have a brand new playlist. Now, I haven't had a chance to mark it into the playlist yet, but I'm creating some little 5-minute nuggets or little 5-minute tips when you're in a hurry and you just want to watch something on how to solve a math problem or just something quick and to the point. 5 minutes or less is my goal. I may go over a little bit occasionally, but just finished one of those where we did a math problem and love for you to check those out. You can go to Global Real Estate School. Go to YouTube and just search for Global Real Estate School, and from there be sure and subscribe to our channel. I had a new subscriber yesterday. I'm at 182 subscribers. Now, I have a tech guy website or channel, and I have quite a few subscribers there, and I've done some sales meeting things where I've had literally hundreds of thousands of views. But I'm starting my Global Real Estate School, and my goal's to get over 100,000 subscribers. So we're at 182, but we can get there when people like you subscribe to my YouTube channel and tell others about it. Now, I do want to mention that this information on this website or the YouTube channel, or if you go out to YouTube and you find this on my podcast or whatever, this is information that will help you pass the national exam, okay? It is not state specific. Occasionally I may do some state specific material for those states where I offer the pre-licensed real estate course. But for the most part, subscribe to my podcast. You can go to iTunes or Podbean. We are also on Spotify. Just look for Global Real Estate School, and you can study and listen on your way to work. You can study and listen when you're exercising. And even if you have a real estate license, you're going to pick up information that will help you in the trenches. Set yourself apart from the average real estate professional who maybe says, I don't want to remember any of that stuff from pre-licensed real estate school. Because I want to tell you what, when I went back to real estate school and got my broker's license, side note for those of you in Missouri, I offer the broker's course on my Global Real Estate School website. But when I went back to get my broker's license and I started going back through the material, it was like things started clicking with me because I'd been working in the business, and my vocabulary for real estate really blossomed, and I was able to explain things better to my buyers and sellers. And really, and I hope I didn't get, I'm going to have to go back out here and probably reconnect. And my apologies here. Let me go back out to I'll try to put that back on. We should be good to go here. Okay, so I think I'm back. So my apology. A phone call came in, and I thought I had that on. The silent mode, but anyway, my apologies. So where were we? We were talking about when I went back and went to broker school and I started learning that information. It really took my business to a whole new level. So I said all of that just to say, if you are a real estate professional and you're subscribing to the podcast, you're going to pick up information and learn information that will help you make more money as a real estate professional. And once you pass the test, you can continue to listen to some of the content we have here. Okay, I think we're broadcasting loud and clear. I have the notifications set on my phone, except for family members. And so one of my daughters actually called, and that's what kicked the camera offline. But I think we're broadcasting loud and clear, and hopefully we will have no more interruptions during the broadcast. So we're going to talk about encumbrances today. I have gone on too long with some of the other things. Some of you want to say, hey, I want to study the information and learn the information. So I want to get into that right now for you. It's chapter 9 in my book. It's called Encumbrances. And really, I'm just going to go through some of the items that are in my chapter 9. And one of the things I start out with in this module is I have the phrase, all liens are considered encumbrances, but not all encumbrances are considered liens. Well, what does that mean? Well, an encumbrance is anything that affects the title to the property. So an encumbrance, and that doesn't mean it's affecting it negatively. For example, an easement is an example of an encumbrance. So that's, when we say all liens are encumbrances, all liens affect, they're an encumbrance. They affect the title to the real estate. But not all encumbrances are considered liens, because an encumbrance could be a license, it could be an easement, it could be a restriction, it could be an encroachment, as we'll talk about in the chapter as we go through this. But just understand that an encumbrance, EN, and I should have had that where I could pop that up on the screen, and I actually can go over here to this. An encumbrance, you can see here how it is spelt, ENCUMBRANCES. So, and I'm tried to pull that up a little larger, but right there in the middle of the screen. See if I can draw on this. So there it is right there. An encumbrance. So you can see things such as easements, restrictions, air and water rights, encroachments, license, etc. Now, there are several types of easements that we're going to look at, and the first one we want to look at is called an easement appurtenant. See that right there in the middle of the page? It is a right or a privilege that an owner has, and the owner is called the dominant tenant, while the other person is called the servient tenement. All right? So I'm going to switch over here, and I actually wanted to go back into, which I had this a minute ago. Let's see if we can put that back in. Picture in picture, and give me just a second. I should have this up there. There we go. I'll just stick that right up there. So now you should be able to see me as we go through this information. So I'm going to go out here and show you, draw this. My 5-minute tip I just did for you a minute ago. I want to show you a little bit regarding what the easement appurtenant looks like. And for some reason, we are not showing. It should pop up there in a second. I love it when technology doesn't work, but we'll go back to none, and let me move back over here. And I'm going to try to see what is going on. I wanted to draw this out for you here. Hopefully this will pop back up here and we can be going. And if I don't see that shortly here, so let's see if that works here. I may have to, and I think I know what the problem might be. I may have to reconnect the, and there it is. Okay. So now we're back, we are back up, and there we go. All right. So I just want to draw this out for you so you see it. This is an easement appurtenant. And when we have an easement appurtenant, I'm going to just draw a parcel of property here. Okay? And I'm going to call this lot owner A right there. And back here in the back is lot owner B. Now here's the roadway down here, and this might be over here, lot owner C, and this over here is lot owner D. Here's the roadway, and so as you can see, B has no way to get to their property. Should put my lot owner D down here a little bit where you can see that. B has no way to get to their property. So what B would need to try to get is an easement. And the easement might be across A's property. So this would be, let's just say, a 20-foot easement. And this easement would be called an easement appurtenant. A-P-P-U-R-E-N-A-N-T, I think. I'm a creative speller, but an easement appurtenant. We'll come back to that. Now, you have a dominant tenement and a servient tenement, or tenant, you could refer to it. B is considered the dominant tenant, okay? And A is the servient tenant. I'll put those back up so you can see that here again. In fact, I'll just throw that up right here. I wish there was, save a copy of this, and we'll save it on the iPad, because by saving it and pulling it back up, it will allow me to draw. So here again, we're looking at this right here, an easement appurtenant, A-P-P-U-R-T-E-N-A-N-T, appurtenant. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then we have the dominant tenement and the servient tenement, or tenant, you could either way. So in this example, what we're looking at here is, and the way I look at it is, if you are allowing someone to go across your property, you would be serving. Servient, you're serving, yes, by all means go across my land. If you're the person, such as lot owner B, who's using this easement, you are considered the dominant tenement. You're dominating the situation, where A is more serving, okay? So that's an example of an easement. Now, we do have what is called an easement in gross. And an easement in gross, notice this might be a utility line. See that? And it goes across C's property, part of B's and D's property, right back through there. Now, notice here that with an easement in gross, there's only, and I'm going to highlight that, only servient estates. And by the way, you could see the word estate used with that as well. So remember that in a pertinent easement, right up here, you have a dominant and a servient estate. However, with an easement in gross, you only have servient estates. And if we go back, you can kind of see that in this example, everyone's serving the utility company by allowing them to use their land to go across to get the services to the people that need to have those. Now we also have an easement by necessity. You can see that right here. This type of easement comes about because of normally landlocked parcels of property. So there's no way you can get to your property, and so the court would generally grant you an easement by necessity. In Missouri, where I live, you cannot have any landlocked parcels of property. However, let's just go back to this example, and let's say lot owner A, this was blacktop, and they put this road in because they had a big garage or workshop back here. Okay, and so A paid for this to get back to this barn or workshop. And all of a sudden now B comes along and says, hey court, legal Mr. Judge or Mrs. Judge, either one, right? I can't get to my property, it's landlocked. So I want an easement by necessity. I can't have landlocked property, and A needs to give me the right to use that blacktop road. Well, yes, the court could grant B the opportunity to use that, but they also might make B pay for that to help offset the cost of that road. So what I want you to understand here is that, and we say it right here, the court may grant an easement by necessity. Do you see that? But it could require the dominant estate to pay valuable consideration to the servient estate. So just understand that just because property might be landlocked does not mean the court might, they could grant you the easement, but you might have to pay for it, okay? And then we have an easement by prescription. This is kind of fun, an easement by prescription, because with an easement by prescription, you actually have someone who's using the property uninterrupted for a certain length of time. Now on the national exam, they're not going to ask you any specifics. You know, in Missouri it's 10 years, open, notorious, hostile. In other words, you're using it and you know you probably don't own it, or even that, you know, you've been using it open, notorious for 10 consecutive years, and one owner can tack on to that. But for the national part of the exam, you just need to really understand what an easement by prescription is, and that's the getting an easement or using it for a certain length of time, and it wasn't yours. The courts may come back and grant you an easement by prescription. Good example where I live right here in Missouri. In many of my years, I spent selling real estate in an old mining community where years ago the miners built all the homes, and they say that a lot of the streets in my community were actually formed by the way the horses would take the miners to work, or the donkeys would take the material out of the lead mines. And a lot of houses were built, and there were many houses because we have to get surveys on FHA and VA loans, and many times a driveway might be over the property line, which is an encroachment, or a garage is over the property line, which is an encroachment that we'll talk about. But because those driveways had been there for so long, they could be granted an easement by prescription because no one had ever stopped them from using that property. So keep that in mind, that that can come about, and it's called an easement by prescription. Let's see, just want to make sure that, going back over here to where I was, and there we go. Okay, so moving on down, we're going to talk a little bit, and you need to, and this is just, again, where I was talking about, it's the word tacking. That's where I asked the question, what if someone used it for a certain length of time and someone else used it for another length of time? And the answer is yes. That's called tacking, and you can tack onto that as well. Now, we need to know this right here for the exam. Easements are created in several ways. Well, first of all, through what is called reservation, okay? Reservation is if I'm going to sell my property, I could reserve an easement. So let's go back here and let's draw a new piece of property. And let's just say that I own this 100 acres. And I want to sell off 60 on the front side, and I want to keep 40 back here because there's some beautiful views, and this is where my wife and I have always wanted to build our dream home, just to be able to look out over the beautiful views back there. So I'm going to sell the front 60, but I'm going to reserve an easement along this side so that I can build my driveway and get back to my property. That is easement by reservation. The second way is through grant, such as through the use of a deed. In other words, if this is lot owner B and this is lot owner A, B could come to me and say, could I get an easement over here on your property? And I could say, sure, I'll be glad to give you an easement. And so through a deed, they define the legal description, which is probably going to be a meets and bounds legal description. It's going to start here, go up there, go over here, and come back to here, and back to the what? Point of beginning. So it'll probably be a meets and bounds legal description, you know, that'll be 20 or 25 feet wide, and then they're going to have stipulations in the deed that you can't put a business back there, you can't have all these cars, you know, it can't be excessively used and so forth. But in this case, it's just through grant. You could do it by necessity. You're landlocked, right? Easement by, we talked about that right up here, an easement by necessity. So that's one way. You could do it through long-term usage. That's an easement by prescription. You've used it so long that, you know, that it's now you get the right to use it because no one ever stopped you. And it could be through implication, easement by implication, which is kind of an interesting topic. I'd almost love to pull my book up and, you know, look at that. But I guess you could say, which is a combination of an easement by prescription, but if this landowner you know, allowed me to build this road back here, there could be some type of an implied creation of that easement. And I'll just take a quick look here. Mr. Riley's book, John Riley, he's got a great little book here on real estate terminology. And I'll just quickly see if I can find an easement by implication. I'm trying to see if there's something there that might help us. And probably with trying to read this here, I don't think you're going to see anything through implication on the exam, and I don't see anything that's really popping out here. So let's not worry about that there with that particular. I will report back to you on my next webinar that we do. But those are some ways that that easements can be created. Now, I mentioned down here, and we can highlight this, keep in mind that to create an easement, you need two separate parties of landowners, one party who will grant the land easement to run across, and another party who wishes to benefit. And we can see right here, two parties. This is the person granting, and this is the person who's going to benefit. All right, good job. And a couple of other things, they will ask you some questions on this about how easements are terminated, and I think we can go through this very quickly. First of all, by a merger when both owners become one. So I go back to this right here. If B purchased A's property, then you can see that that's a merger of the property, so this easement's no longer needed. It would, at that point, go away. By abandonment of the easement, no one uses it for many, many years, that would terminate. The purpose no longer exists. Let's say B, all of a sudden there's a new highway that's built and the highway goes across B's property. Well, B's no longer landlocked, so B can, that easement would terminate. Adverse possession, which is that similar to an easement by prescription. Adverse possession is when someone blocks that, or they, stop anyone from using it, then, and that goes on for a certain length of time, that would terminate the easement. Excessive use, if B put a tavern or a nightclub back there and cars were going in and out, or even if B turned that into a mobile home park, A may be able to go back and say, look, I gave B an easement to get back and forth to his property. I didn't know he was going to put 100 mobile homes back there and all these 100 homeowners are going to be going back and forth. Or I never knew he was going to put a nightclub back there or a bar or a tavern. And every weekend we've got tons of people, thousands of people going in and out. So excessive use, non-use, they talk about destruction, release, and so forth. And then the last thing I want to talk about in this chapter and for today is a license. A license can be verbal or in writing. I would remember that. License can be verbal or in writing, and so you can terminate a license at any time. Think of a license as someone gives you a hunting permit to go hunt on their property. That would be a license. You can go hunt, but I can terminate it at any time. A lot of times when you get a ticket to go to a concert or a ball game, a football or baseball or basketball game, hockey game at one of the local national events, those are considered license. So they can, if you throw something on the field, they can terminate you, excuse me, terminate your right to be on their property, and they can kick you right off. Now, it's important to know that license can be terminated upon death. You might see questions that would ask you, Bob Smith has the right to go on to Larry's property, to do whatever, and if Larry dies, Bob's no longer allowed to use that right. What did he have? It's a license, okay? So just understand that license are different than easements. License it's no transfer. It's nothing that could go on forever. And that's the interesting thing about an easement we need to understand too, is once that A gives B that easement goes on. If B sells their property to someone else and they sell it, that easement goes on into the future. The only way it could be terminated are by those items that we talked about earlier. So a license is not that way. A license can terminate at any time, but and death would terminate a license. But an easement is recorded. It's an encumbrance, and it's going to be something that can go on forever as part of that use for the person who was given that or granted that easement. Well, gosh, I feel like I had some hiccups and issues today, but hopefully you picked up a few things that was helpful for you. I'm trying to do something every day in August. Today I actually worked with one of my students one-on-one, and then I turned around and did my little math thing that I'll fix shortly, and then wanted to do a key terms webinar. And so anyway, my apologies for some of our technical difficulties, some of my mix-ups and mess-ups, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will subscribe to the channel, listen to my podcast, and reach out to me anytime you have questions. I want to help you pass the real estate exam on the first attempt. Be sure and go out to globalrealestateschool.com and check out our flashcards and our practice exams that can help you pass the test on the first attempt. And then like us on iTunes, our podcast, join our Facebook page, follow me on Instagram, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Help me get to 100,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day and a good evening. I will talk to you soon.